The many Fallout games are home to a wide assortment of unique and flavorful locations. Many of these are pivotal to the main quest and side quests, and subsequently come with a map marker for fast travel. Some locations, however, don't come with a map marker. They're unmarked on the Pip-Boy map. Now, whether they're locations off the beaten path or are meant to be hidden from the player character, these locations tend to have some great hidden stories and lore associated with them. Here are 5 of my favorite Fallout 4 unmarked locations and the stories behind them. Plumbers Secret. I'm going to start this list with a bonus entry, so it'll really be 6 unmarked locations. Southeast of Mass Gravel and Sand, you'll come across a fairly large warehouse. This location is known as Plumbers Secret. Pre-war, it appears to have been some sort of plumbing store separated into 2 parts, a storefront and a warehouse. Post-war, however, it is now completely abandoned, outside of a few radroaches, that is. Lore-wise, that's all there is to it. No background peculiar plumbing plot or dubious design. No related quests. Nothing. The reason why it makes this list, though, is because of the second word in the location's name, secret. The location hides a secret. If one takes a gander to the ceiling, they will notice a line of plungers that have been stuck to it. If you follow the series of A Plumber's Best Friend, you'll come to a couple wooden boards hastily nailed to the ceiling. Take your weapon of choice, aim, fire, and the boards will come tumbling down. Along with them are a capstash and a syringer rifle, yours for the taking. It's a really interesting and unique way of hiding a location's loot and can very well be missed for most players. On to unmarked location number 5. The switchboard. This one is likely the most well-known of the unmarked locations, as the player goes here part of the railroad main story. Located in the historic town of Lexington lies an innocuous franchise coffee shop called Slocum's Joe. Upon first impressions, the location is nothing more than just your average cafe, selling lukewarm coffee and semi-stale donuts. Sure, it didn't run that well, it was hardly cleaned, and the place sorta smelled like rotten eggs, but for your average Joe, a cup of Joe is a cup of Joe. What no one realized, however, was that the crappy coffee store was actually a front for a secret underground government facility. Known as the Switchboard, America's Defense Intelligence Agency used the Slocum's Joe coffee shop to disguise and hide what they were really doing at the site. All the employees, staff, management, what have you, were all just undercover agents working for the DIA. And to maintain their cover, these agents would work as normal Slocum's Joe employees, serving coffee and donuts to the unknowing residents of Lexington. Now, of course, the government agency wouldn't really want customers to come in and accidentally find out their secret, so the team would go about finding ways to reduce traffic to the cafe. This was done by cutting the cleaning of the coffee shop in half and introducing a foul smell in what the team called Operation Rotten Egg. The hope was that they could make the coffee shop enough of a disaster so that people would go somewhere else for their morning fix. While the results of this operation are unknown, I know that I certainly wouldn't be going anywhere near a place that smelled like rotten eggs. It's not my fancy. Now, the reason why all these measures were taken was to ensure the secrecy of the switchboard facility. The DIA didn't want anyone to know of the highly classified projects that were in development. The most notable of these was their advanced computer AI known as the Predictive Analytic Machine. The PAM initiative commenced in 2067 as part of a joint project between the United States military and the Defense Intelligence Agency. With nuclear warfare being a real possibility and outcome for the Sino-American War, the states wanted a way to foresee and potentially avoid all nuclear conflict. PAM would serve that purpose. PAM was a computer AI that would be fed civilian and military databases in order to accurately predict Chinese plans and movements. Using this data, an operator would be able to request PAM to play out a hypothetical scenario and come up with reasonable responses to the scenario, and so forth. It is very similar to the 1983 sci-fi movie War Games, and the movie was likely an inspiration for Fallout's PAM. Anyway, after some time serving as a mere immobile computer, the folks at the DIA decided to implant PAM into an Assaultron body. This transition was thought to have been made because PAM would be moved to the White House sometime after January 2077, and it made it easier to move her around in the event of the switchboard being discovered. However, it wouldn't be until nearly 200 years later, well after the Great War, that the switchboard would be discovered by a group outside of the US government. The post-war synth-saving community, the Railroad, discovered the facility and made the location their new headquarters. The group's computer experts would find a dormant Pam, reprogram her to suit their needs, and bring her back online. The bot would quickly become a great asset to the Railroad's campaign against their enemy and rival, the Institute. However, this was not without some loss, as sometime after 2286, the switchboard was attacked by a group of Institute coursers and synths. The surviving Railroad members and Pam would be forced to relocate to the Old North Church, where they can be found hiding by the start of Fallout 4. And that's the story of the switchboard, a secret government base hidden under a coffee shop, turned Railroad HQ, turned synth-infested stronghold. UFO crash site. This next location actually isn't in the game quite yet when the sole survivor first leaves Vault 111. Let me explain. The UFO crash site is a random encounter that occurs at some point during Fallout 4. As far as I know, the exact trigger is uncertain, but it appears to happen after being level 20 and then entering the open world. I remember it happening in one of my playthroughs after leaving the Mass Fusion building. Others have noted it happening after leaving Vault 75. Some have even said it happened to them as they left Sanctuary. So it would appear that the random encounter is random. Reddit user Dante Alighieri perused the creation kit and found that the crash site is triggered by quest UFO Crash Quest. The quest calls upon 3 quest aliases. These are UFO 01 Activator. This is the UFO item which plays the flyover sounds and explosion sounds. Then there's UFO Crash Enable Reference, which is an object that enables all damage that's associated with the crash site and disables how the site would look without the UFO. And lastly, it calls Companion, which likely detects which companion you have and plays their voice line related to the crash.
You saw that too, right?
Yeah, that's the technical side of it. It's pretty interesting in my opinion. Anyway, during your travels as you're exploring the Commonwealth, you may begin to hear the sounds of an incoming plane, but as you look up, if you're quick enough, you might notice that it's not quite a plane, but an unidentified flying object, a UFO. If you travel in the direction of the crash, you'll find yourself just southeast of Oberland Station. As you approach the scene of the crash, you're met with quite a bit of carnage from the wreck. The grass is singed, trees have fallen, small fires are still burning, and a trail of strange green goo leads away from the spaceship. If you do your best Nick Valentine impression and follow the trail, it leads you to a small cave. Inside said cave is where you'll find the pilot, badly injured holding their wounds, and attempting to send a distress signal back to their comrades. If you approach, their fight or flight kicks in, and an alien pilot makes their final stand against the sole survivor. As the alien lays defeated, their unique blaster and a random amount of ammo are yours for the taking. I know it's a bit controversial, but I have to say that I've been a fan of having aliens canonized in the franchise. I think if used sparingly, like in this instance, it really adds and complements both the sci-fi aspect and otherworldly elements of the game's world. Adds to the mystery and all that, you know? The Milton Parking Garage. Next on this list is one of the most twisted locations in all of Fallout 4. It's also one of my favorite locations in the game. Not because I'm a sick person, I just think it's really well designed and adds a ton of flavor to the world of Fallout. Anyway, across from Fallon's department store is an unassuming parking garage. Surrounding the red door to enter the parking facility are a bunch of arrows pointing towards the door. Someone obviously wants people to enter. What could go wrong? Well, the answer is quite a bit. Beyond the door is a depraved maze and obstacle course, somewhat similar to that of the Nuka World Raiders Gauntlet. It's like something out of a Saw movie. The garage is filled with traps, hazards, and torturous displays of what I can only assume to be past victims of the maze. Some of the paths of the maze lead you to dead ends that feature brutal displays. Others take you to environmental hazards and booby traps, and some just take you to miscellaneous loot. If you follow the main pathway as you ascend the parking garage levels, you'll come across an assortment of strange dangers and traps. Your first obstacle is a numbers puzzle. By pressing the leftmost and rightmost buttons, you'll be granted a way forward. After continuing on, your next obstacle is a series of grenade bouquets wired to many bathroom scales. It might be wise to disable them all. Immediately after, another tripwire ties into a missile launcher that is aimed to hit a car. Unsurprisingly, this series of explosions will prove lethal. Next up, the third level of the parking garage is home to a family of feral ghouls. Clear these guys out and you may proceed to the final level. On the last level of the parking garage maze, you'll come to 3 closed doors. 2 are traps and 1 leads to safe passage. Once through, get past a few more booby traps and tripwires, and you'll finally come to what you've been searching for, some nice loot. But there's a catch. The loot has been divided into 2 jail cells. Opening one will cause the other to evaporate in flames thanks to a flamer trap. Pick wisely. After all that, you finally cleared the Milton parking garage maze. Yippee. Now, of course, the story and lore behind the maze is a bit of a mystery. Explicitly, there's no true explanation to the location. With that being said, however, I think it's fair to say that the location was likely created by some sick lone raider, possibly as a way to indirectly loot some poor suckers. I say this for a couple reasons. For starters, there is a primitive living space area on the 4th floor with a single bed. 2. The decor of the area is very raider chic. Decapitated heads, mutilated bodies strewn about, and grotesque art pieces. And 3. Several corpses of settlers and traders can be found on the 2nd floor, likely past scavengers who tried their hand at clearing the maze. The ghouls patrolling the 3rd floor also leads me to believe that the owner of the maze was likely a ghoul themselves. As feral ghouls aren't openly hostile to other ghouls, feral or not, it would make sense. How else would you be able to get a herd of feral ghouls into your death maze without them accidentally triggering a trap or having them start attacking you in the process? If you were a ghoul yourself, it would pose the least amount of risk to yourself in the event of something going wrong. I think that the lack of survival amenities in the living space corroborates this as well. Ghouls have been known to require less food and water to survive than a regular human, so I suppose keeping a stockpile of non-perishables wouldn't be necessary. With all that being said, we will never be able to be certain about who or what constructed this death maze. Let me know what you think. Who do you think was the mastermind behind the Milton parking garage maze? Deacons Camp. This next location is another one that has a bit of ambiguity, though I think the community as a whole has come to an agreement about what's going on here. Found near the entrance of Vault 111, a small shack and camp can be found. This is the supposed camp of railroad agent Deacon. Now, Deacon himself is a man of mystery. Working for the railroad, his primary goal is to gather intel on anyone deemed as a person of interest to the organization. The sole survivor was one such person. Throughout the first act of the game, a disguised Deacon can be found in many key locations, seemingly tracking the sole survivor's movements and keeping tabs on the new key player in the Commonwealth. He listens in during the argument between Piper and Mayor McDonough at the start of the game when the sole survivor first visits Diamond City. He wanders around Good Neighbor as a drifter and can even be found in one of the pods at the Memory Den. He is disguised as a caravan worker at Bunker Hill. We know all this thanks to the unique dialogue Disguised Deacon says when interacted with.
Sure love trading here. For trade stuff.
I'll be honest, he's not the most convincing spy. Now, due to the nature of Deacon following the sole survivor around throughout the game, many fans have speculated that the tiny encampment west of Vault 111 is the location that Deacon stayed at while performing reconnaissance missions. Etched on a wooden board is the railroad symbol meaning ally, meaning that whoever set up this small little outpost was working for the railroad. Now again, while there's no explicit explanation of the location, and even though Deacon will mention not knowing who you are if you immediately seek out the railroad, it seems likely that this little camp is what the railroad, and more specifically, Deacon used for monitoring the movements of the sole survivor. North End Graveyard. The last unmarked location on my list is one that you very likely passed on your journey following the Freedom Trail, and that is the North End Graveyard. Now, upon first glance, there's nothing remarkable about this location. Many times I've passed it without giving it a second glance. Much more interested in following the red line that leads to the Old North Church, or taking interest in the Cabot House or Pickman Gallery. The North End Graveyard isn't very big and only home to a few feral ghouls. The location itself wouldn't be notable at all if it weren't for being the final resting site of legendary coppersmith Shem Drown. Now, this is one of the many instances where Fallout and our real world share a similar history. Shem Drown was a famous colonial coppersmith and tin plate worker operating in Boston in the mid-1700s. He was credited with inventing America's first weather vane, an archer that was installed atop the Providence House in Boston. Drown's most famous work was the copper gilded grasshopper that sits atop Faneuil Hall. In 1755, an earthquake caused the vane to fall from the building. What was once a cultural pillar of Boston now lay broken on the ground. Drown and his son Thomas would repair and remount the grasshopper, with Thomas leaving a note titled "Food for the Grasshopper" in the belly of the weather vane. It reads, "Shem Drown made it, May 25th, 1742. To my brethren and fellow grasshoppers. Felony year 1753, 1755. November 13th. Early in ye morning, by a great earthquake by my old master above. Again, like to have met with utter ruin by fire, by hopping timely from my public station, came of the broken bones and much bruised, cured and fixed, old master's son Thomas Drown, June 28, 1768. And though I will promise to discharge my office, yet I shall vary as ye wind." Today, the weather vane remains as the only original part of Faneuil Hall since its construction in 1742. When Shem Drown passed away, he would be buried at Copp's Hill Burying Ground in Boston, which is actually roughly located where the North End Graveyard is located in-game. It's pretty interesting, actually. In Fallout, the story remains much of the same with real life, with one small exception. If the sole survivor reads a case file about one Marty Bullfinch in Valentine's Detective Agency, or goes to the rooftop of Faneuil Hall themselves and inspects the grasshopper, they'll find a note labeled "Food for a Grasshopper." The note reads much of the same as the real-life one, except for one small addendum to it. A new final line is added to the note. It reads, "On the banks of the Charles, where forever rests Master Shem, there one can find a life's worth." Charles refers to the Charles River, the main waterway that passes through the map of Fallout 4. Following the clue, the sole survivor will happen upon the North End Graveyard. They can then dig up the casket of the late coppersmith and take the treasure of Shem Drown for themselves. A gold bar, 2 silver bars, 3 copper bars, and a unique revolutionary sword. I think the inclusion of the Gilded Grasshopper side quest is a cool nod and tie-in to the history of Boston. It gives the opportunity for players to learn about some real-world history as it pertains to the game's location. And the fact that the real Gilded Grasshopper still sits upon Faneuil Hall today, centuries after it was created, is quite fascinating. And that, my friends, is 6 unmarked Fallout 4 locations and the stories behind them. A Plumber's Secret, a fake coffee shop, a pilot's bad day, a killer parking garage, a spy's camp, and the final resting place of a Boston legend. Thanks for listening. That's all from me today, folks. If you liked the video, be sure to share and subscribe. Have a good rest of your day and a happy new year. Cheers.
Deacon, where have you been?
You're having a party. What gives with my invitation?
I need intel. Who is this?
Well, he's got to be someone. He made it down here, right? Normal people just don't do that.
So you got nothing. He's a complete unknown.
What are our options? Shoot him? Come on.